It's Halloween night in 1596. A woman named Janet and her son, Thomas, left their home to gather around the fish cross in the centre of Aberdeen. Many others joined them, and as the clock strikes 12, the devil appears. They begin to converse with them while consuming food and drink. Instruments are brought out, and the group starts to sing and dance. Thomas leads them up and down the streets, running as fast as they can. One woman couldn't run as quick as the rest. Thomas strikes her because she spoiled their fun. This is commonly named as a Witches Sabbath and sparked the witch panic within Aberdeen due to Thomas's confession. As the story is retold, dates and details begin to not add up. What truly happened on Halloween night of 1596, and what did these accused witches have to go through? To help understand what may have happened that night, we need to figure out how these hunts began and the experience that these accused witches endured. If we look back from 1596 all the way to 1562, this was the year that the Witchcraft Act was restored, which made any sorcery or bewitchment illegal and punishable by death. This act was in progress at the time of the Sabbath. However, there were only a small number of cases within Aberdeen when the act was passed. By the time of the Sabbath, this amount increased rapidly within just a year. Professor William Nafee, who teaches history and a course on Scottish witch hunting, helps explain why there was such a huge jump in cases and who was often on the receiving end of these hunts.
So there are two types of commissions, they're called, that you can get from the state in early modern Scotland. And one is a commission to investigate certain people for a certain crime. In other words, permission to conduct interrogations, that sort of thing. Now that is what happens in the few cases before it starts in Aberdeen. Or you can ask for the second type of commission, and that is a 5-year commission that gives you permission to find out about a crime. So in this case, you've got 5 years to find witches. Now that's very different than being told you may interrogate person X for witchcraft. So the city, after Thomas Leys' confession, goes to the Crown and asks for the second commission. And this gives them extremely broad powers to investigate, not individuals, but to investigate a conspiracy of witches, which may or may not exist. That's not the point. They believe it does exist, and they now have permission to go find witches. I think that everyone in this period believed that there were unseen powers that could be manipulated by human beings. Now that makes sense because, in a sense, the turning of the bread and wine into the body and blood of Christ is utilizing an unseen power to do that. So there's certainly a belief that that is there. And I think most people believe that some individuals, usually known to the community, were able to do this. And they could use that power for good, so to cure a baby, or to make a cow start giving milk again, or to make someone fall in love with you, that sort of thing. Or they could use it for ill, to do exactly the opposite of those things.
Once these people were accused of being a witch, they were held in a prison pending their trial. One of the prisons used during this time was in St. Nicholas's Kirk. On the east side of the church lies St. Mary's Chapel, which often Aberdeen residents walk past without knowing the dark history its walls hold. The ownership of the chapel is now under the Open Space Trust. Arthur Winfield, who is the project leader, became curious about the chapel's history after finding a strange ring nailed into the wall.
Well, I've learnt quite a lot over the years, but initially I knew nothing about them. I suppose it started with the witch's ring. Why was it there? And just reading what I could find about it. And then just trying to relate that to the surroundings here and what it must have been like to have been imprisoned in this building over winter. It's bad enough with thick winter clothing in here in winter, but presumably scant clothing, scant food, just it doesn't bear thinking about, really. As prisons, there was one other in this building. Back then, the spire was wooden, and there was another prison in the spire, which must have been even colder than down here, I would imagine. Unfortunately, all the remains of that have gone. There was a fire in 1874 which burnt the wooden spire down. But early pictures of the kirk, even early photographs of the kirk, do show the wooden spire.
While they were held in these prisons, the accused would have to go through a harsh interrogation to investigate what witchcraft crimes have taken place.
So you would have someone called a watcher who would watch someone in the cell, and if they started to fall asleep, then they would wake them, and then they would walk them. So we talk about it in these trials of watching, waking, and walking. So the idea is the person is being deprived of sleep. And we all know that deprivation from sleep makes someone very suggestive. And if they repeatedly say to you, are you a witch? At some point you're going to say yes, just because you're exhausted, you're weakened, you want it to end. And then if they say, okay, you say you're a witch, what did you do? Well, you know what answers they want because you've been told that all of your life, that witches go to Sabbaths, that witches dance with demons, that witches have sex with demons, that they eat dead, they eat babies, all of that sort of stuff. You know those answers. So when they say, what did you do? You know what to say. You don't have people after coercion or after judicial torture saying, I made a cow go dry. They all say, I went to a Sabbath.
To investigate further, we need to look at the evidence which is left over from this period. In a townhouse on Union Street sits an extensive collection of archived material, including what survived from the witchcraft panic era. This could give us the answers as to what Janet and Thomas were doing during this time and whether it was likely that the Sabbath took place. Fiona Musk, who was the archivist within Aberdeen City Archives, walks us through what documents can help give us a clue as to what life looked like then.
There are documents which did survive up until the 1830s, and these have been transcribed. So they're in a published book by the Spalding Club. So we know what those documents said, but frustratingly, they haven't survived. But there are supporting documents held within the city's collections. The accounts for the Dean of Guild, they list the names of the people who were executed, as well as the amount of money that was being paid for that and what that money was being spent on. So we know that things like tar, that there were barrels being used, that there were spars being put up to help with crowd control. These are all mentioned in the accounts. And so you get an idea of what the executions may have been like. And so there's enough supporting documents surviving in Aberdeen to get a picture of what was happening at the time. These are the accounts of the Dean of Guild for Aberdeen, who were responsible for the payments for the execution of the witches, which took place in 1596, 1597. These are the individual items that were used for the executions, and these are names of those who were executed at that particular time. What's quite interesting, however, is that Janet Wishart and Isabel Cockey are listed together, but when you look at the transcriptions of their accusations, Janet was actually executed before Isabel. And then here's the execution of Thomas Leys, who was Janet's son, and you can see the list of items that were used for his execution there. And it continues over for the various other people. The Wishart family, or the Leys family, they seem to have been very well known. Janet, her accusations go back a number of years, and it's clear that she interacted with a large number of people who lived in Aberdeen. It's not entirely clear what she actually did. She is accused of cursing people if they didn't do something that she wanted them to do. She's accused of making people unwell. She is accused of disturbing the peace, that she was out at night an awful lot, that she met with other women and cast spells or cantrips, as they're noted as being called. They were among the first people to be tried and then executed. It's difficult to know exactly why this family in particular were accused. Janet and Thomas were executed. Her husband and her 4 daughters were also accused of witchcraft, and it's said that they were then banished. Their accusations were basically because they lived in the same home as Janet and Thomas, and if they lived there, they must have seen that things were going on, and that's what they were accused of as well. This book is the first volume of the Miscellany of the Spalding Club, and it is the one that contains the transcriptions of the documents, which include the lists of accusations made against those accused of witchcraft in Aberdeen in 1596 and 1597. What we're looking at here is a transcription of the Dean of Guild accounts. Whilst the originals of the accusations don't exist, we can compare the transcription of the Dean of Guild accounts, which appear in a different volume of the Spalding Club, to the originals. You can see here that here's the execution of Thomas Leys there, and that's it in the original volume. So we can closely look at the accuracy of these transcriptions, which we unfortunately can't do with the lists of accusations.
Although the original accusations against Janet and Thomas have been lost, the Spalding Club still has a record of transcriptions, which is the only piece of evidence left detailing the story of the Sabbath. This is listed within Thomas's ditty.
What are known as the witchcraft ditties are the lists of accusations laid against the people accused of witchcraft. Each ditty is an accusation of something that people thought was witchcraft. So this section here says how the devil appeared before Janet Wishart and Thomas Leys while they were in jail. And it says that the devil came to the window of the vault and spoke to them both. And they asked him what would become of them. And he said, "Deny all things that are said of you." So here we have the transcription of the accusations made against Thomas Leys, who was Janet Wishart's son. The very first thing that he is accused of is appearing along with other named people, including his mother. It's the said Thomas Leys accompanied with Umquill, Janet Wishart, so Umquill means the deceased, Isabel Cockey, Isabel Manteith, Catherine Mitchell, the relict of Umquill Charles Dunn, so that means widow of the deceased Charles Dunn, who was a litster. That was his occupation. And then it says that other sorcerers and witches, with a great number of other witches, come to the market and fish cross of Aberdeen under the conduct and guiding of the devil present within you, all in company, playing before you on his kind of instruments. You all danced about both the said crosses and the meal market a long space of time, in which devil dance you, the said Thomas, was foremost and led the ring, and hit the said Catherine Mitchell because she spoiled your dance because she didn't run as fast as the rest of you. Testified by the said Catherine Mitchell, who was present with you at the time of the foresaid dancing with the devil.
After reviewing the evidence, it's clear that Thomas confessed to the Sabbath after Janet's execution, but there was no mention of it within her own ditty. It seemed that no one knew of the Sabbath until it was mentioned by Thomas, so how did it take place without any notice? With no answer as to where the fish cross was in the archive evidence, a map from the 1600s holds the key. William Nafee takes us to where the fish cross was said to have stood.
According to Thomas Leys' confession, he and a group of other witches met with demons and Satan at a party at the Fish Cross. Now, the Fish Cross doesn't exist anymore in Aberdeen, but it's actually would have been located where the current Market Cross is, in the middle of the Castle Gate. There's an excellent map from the 1650s, which gives a rather bizarre kind of aerial view of the city, and places are numbered on the map, and then there's a key at the bottom that shows what those numbers mean. So we know where the Fish Cross was because it's noted on the map and it's in the middle of the Castle Gate. So it's easy to realize where it was because of that map. The fish cross, like other crosses, whether it's a market cross or the flesher's cross, was basically the kind of sign that meant this is where you set up your stalls to sell those products. So the fish cross would have been surrounded by people selling fish. I think one of the reasons why Thomas Leys' confession is so frightening is because of the centrality of where the fish cross is. And undoubtedly, as part of his confession, saying it was at the fish cross was a way of making it more terrifying to the magistrates. This isn't just in Aberdeen, it's not on the edge of Aberdeen, it's at the very heart of the city, right next to the toll booth, to the seat of power, and it's the major open space in the city, so it's the main gathering place of people as well.
With the fish cross being so central, it doubts whether the Sabbath truly took place due to the only witnesses being accused of witchcraft. Professor Julian Goddard has researched and published many articles surrounding bewitchment, including one focusing on Aberdeen. He discusses what he thinks happened that night.
Some of the confessions describe the witches as having been transformed into hares and cats at the time of the dance. This is an imaginary event retrospectively constructed. And I also pointed out in my article that Janet Wishart clearly hadn't been arrested at the time because the fish cross Sabbath was alleged to have happened at Halloween 1596, so that's the 31st of October 1596. But one of the neighbours described an argument between her and him that had happened in November 1596, so she was clearly still, around and allegedly committing witchcraft even after that. And so I think the whole thing really started in the spring of 1597, but they then retrospectively construct the idea that the witches all met and conspired, because that's what they think that conspiratorial witches do. They meet with the devil and they worship the devil and they play music and dance. And these are sort of stereotypical ideas, and other witches have been induced to confess to these things before. And you see confessions to Sabbaths like this all over Europe, and there's virtually no suggestion that any of these meetings ever took place. No outside person ever comes along and says, I saw the witches dancing at a such and such place. It only ever comes from the confessions. And so what we've got in Aberdeen is a completely standard one. And, to say that it's been constructed in retrospect, isn't to undermine the sincerity of the people who are doing this. I think they're misguided, but they're sincere. They really believe that it happened. I've read many, many confessions that I didn't believe. And, once you've read hundreds of confessions that you don't believe, just think, oh yeah, but I do believe that one. Maybe that one's also coerced, maybe that, so trying to isolate the few that might be genuine or might have enough genuine elements that such and such a person could really have got up in the morning and thought, yep, I'm a witch. I'm going to do witchy things today.
Dr. Rachel Ironside, who specialises in dark tourism and the supernatural, helps explain a little bit more about dealing with prejudice and what we have left in Aberdeen to remember its history.
They, spoke about people dancing naked round the Market Cross, and I think there's probably something about that, given the hysteria that was happening at the time, that it would have been a pretty confident act to go and be quite so brazen in a very central point within Aberdeen if you were going to, if it really did happen. So I think I'm suspicious of the fact that the event itself happened, but certainly the rumours and speculation obviously led to the trials of those individuals that were associated with it. So it happened certainly in the sense of it becoming an event that was built up, whether it was true or not. I think there's a really powerful sort of memorial in Aberdeen, which I think it says something like, we are the grandchildren of the witches that were not burnt. And I think that's a really nice celebration, really, of how we have, hopefully moved a little bit beyond that, but also that, the power of woman really to really, I suppose, reach above that prejudice and, become part of modern day society.
This is the only memorial within Aberdeen which is dedicated to the accused witches who lost their lives to the hysteria. It was done by an artist called Carrie Reichert in 2018 as part of a street art festival called New Art. Gallus Coins, which means brave women, sits just off of Union Street on Correction Wynd. Overlooked by St Nicholas Kirk, the mural names just a handful of the blamed within Aberdeen. It helps retell the important story, to educate those who wander past, and is the only thing in the city which is devoted to ensuring their history is revealed. It details the Sabbath, which we have now learned is likely to be untrue. But we may never know for sure what happened that night. What is more significant is ensuring that this part of Aberdeen's past is retold, to remember those who fell victim to the conspiracy and the panic.